Board Member Chair Hansen.
Thank you. Just two motions for the board from Standards and Assessment today. 11.4, the motion for the board is that the committee moves the board approve the teaching as a profession 3 standards draft 2.
Thank you. We have a motion on the floor that the board approves the teaching as a profession 3 standards draft 2. Discussion to the motion. Seeing none, please vote. The motion passes with Board Member Earl and Moss and Klein opposed. Chair Hansen.
The next motion is on item number, just 1 second, 11.7. The committee moves that the board approve the definitions in EDI definition set 1 as equity, diversity, and inclusion board approved definitions for final approval.
There's a motion on the floor that the board approves the definitions in EDI definition set 1 as equity, diversity, and inclusion board approved definitions for final approval. Discussion to the motion. Board Member Hansen.
I have an amendment to the motion to amend the motion to the committee moves the board approve the definitions in educational equity definitions set 1 as educational equity board approved definitions for final approval. Just to keep our terminology where we've had it in the past, we're talking about educational equity.
Director Van Holten, do we have that? Can you repeat that, Chair Hansen?
Sure.
A little slowly.
So the committee, this would amend the motion to I move that the board approve the definitions in educational equity definitions set 1 as educational equity board approved definitions for final approval.
Second.
Okay, we have a second. That was Board Member Sybil. Discussion to the amendment.
If I could speak to that briefly.
Please do.
We have bounced around a little bit with terminology, and I think the terminology that we started with and want to be consistent with is educational equity and not equity, diversity, and inclusion. This would entail changing the title on the document that you have for review and make it match with our other work that we're doing in committee.
Thank you. Board Member Klein.
So equity, diversity, and inclusion, those are definitions that are included in this definition set. And yet we're calling it educational equity. This is an extension of R277-328. Why? I thought we were done with that. Why are we continuing to move beyond the model training that we've already done?
Chair Hansen.
Sure. R277-328 obligates USBE to provide model training for various aspects of the rule. This is a start or a part of that model training. The definitions are necessary to put all of that model training in context so that we're consistent in our use of words. Not sure what else I can say there. The training that we have done now is just training on the rule, not training in educational equity. It's just training on what the rule provides and the provisions that are there, the prohibitions, the guardrails, the things that are in the rule. So that is just an explanation of the rule that's been done now, and there is more model training to come.
Follow up?
Thank you. Did you have a follow-up question?
Yes, please. My understanding of R277-328 is that it said that we will provide a model training, not a whole series of trainings. I think we should be done with this. I don't know why. At what point does this end? At what point are we done, if not now? Also, if we move forward with all of these trainings, are they all going to fall under educational equity training so that they're all open to the public if they request to review it, or are they going to be called something else so that they can avoid the scrutiny, since the model training or the rule as it states allows parents to review any trainings under educational equity?
Chair Hansen, and then we'll swing back to Board Member Hymas.
There we go.
And we also have Director Van Holten, so I don't know if Chair Hansen or Director Van Holten wants to answer that question.
Yeah, I believe actually Patty Norman has a slide that may help us here, but with regard to 328 and transparency, we've been nothing but transparent. I think the board has been transparent. The intent is to be transparent. That's one of the keystones of the rule, is that any training that goes out is visible to the public. So that is certainly the intent going forward. But Board Member Klein's understanding of the rule is certainly different from mine, and we're taking direction from board leadership. So if board leadership directs us to do otherwise, we will. But I think it would be helpful to look at what Patty Norman has prepared. If we could look at that just for a second.
Can I have access to the screen? Can I have access to screen share? It still won't let me share. There we go. There we go. So I'm not sure if this is helpful or not, but this is what has been put in the backups since about August, about where we're at with the modules for R277-328. Within 328, there are 10 components that are the shalls of what needs to be taught in an LEA, and those 10 components are part of some of the modules that will be in there. So the first part of the module was the step one, which was the overview training on the rule. And that wasn't a module. In the rule itself, it listed professional learning, and professional learning had a definition with it, which means it's extended. It goes back and reviews, and there's learning that applies with it. So the first piece, as they've been following through in standards and assessment, and as we've been bringing it to the board, the first piece was a training on the rule, but it did not include the 10 essential elements that were led in a way that describes professional learning. So those 10 elements were then listed out. And then there's some guardrails in there of the main nots of the things of how that should be done to not promote or endorse. And let me show you what that looks like. So the first part would be that what the board described, the narrated slide deck. We have this on the Educational Equity webpage. What the board approved, and then the slide deck, and then the narration as well. The second part in going through this would be determined with the module one. When we met with our Utah State superintendents, when we were talking about how these 10 elements that you can see here with the dots on the side that are right here, an LEA shall provide professional learning to educators concerning educational equity. These are the 10 things that the rule established. So the first one is the civil rights and law. And then the second would be how to discuss those things. And then, of course, the LEAs can choose to use their modules that they have, but the requirement is that they cover these 10 elements in some way. The requirement from the board was to produce a model training that would go along with them. So anyways, any questions on that?
I do have a question, but I'm going to let some other board members ask it. Do Board Member Hymas?
Board Member Klein has a follow-up.
Is this a new question, Board Member Klein, or a follow-up to that one?
It was just a follow-up comment.
Okay, go ahead. The
way I see this is this This looks a whole lot more like draft 1 of R277-328, which was actually a very pro CRT draft, and that was only changed because the House and Senate passed their resolution. And now it seems like we're going right back to the intent of draft 1, which goes against the House and Senate intent, the resolution that they passed. So I'm just making a public statement that I am not in support of any additional modules or training in this regard where we are inserting these words or that are very much critical race theory and an installation of it. So just wanted to be on record.
Thanks, Board Member Hyman.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Dr. Norman.
Yeah, I just wanted to provide clarity that none of this was in any way edited. These 10 elements come directly from the rule as is, as stated and approved by the board. So this was not edited in any way. So these are the exact statements that is in the rule that was approved by the board.
Thank you. Board Member Hymas, I think we were back to you.
Yeah, well, briefly, and I know this is minute, but I appreciate what Chair Hansen has done here by bringing educational equity back into this. And I don't think that educational equity and EDI are synonymous. And so I don't know how equity, diversity, and inclusion made its way in. Is there a way to get back to what we began with? I mean, words matter. And so I'm not sure if that's a possibility, or if Member Hansen is starting something that we need to get back to, but on some of them it says educational equity, and then it gives the rule. Some say EDI, then gives the rule. I feel like as a board, we're all over the place. If we can't even come together and say this is what it is, there's larger concerns. How do we get back to educational equity?
Chair Hansen, did you want to respond to that? And then we'll go to Board Member Earl. Oh, and I missed Director Van Holten, who has had his hand up the longest. Let me go to him first. Go ahead, Director Van Holten.
I just wanted to quickly piggyback off of what Director Norman said, or Deputy Superintendent Norman said, in that the training that was provided that you all approved was a little bit out of the norm. We don't usually provide an extensive training on what a rule says. And the reason we did that is because the LEAs are not required in this rule to follow the models that are created. And because of that fact, we wanted to be very clear with the LEAs that if they choose to go out on their own and do their own professional learning in compliance with this rule, that they are very clear on where the lines are and what the board meant by all the words in the rule. So the training that you approved is not the professional learning that the rule talks about or the models that the rule talks about. And the rule does state at the end that the superintendent or staff with the board approval will create professional learning that is in compliance with the requirements of the rule. It doesn't specify whether that's one professional learning or if it's many. And there's been a lot of conversation about the fact that there's too much in this rule for a one and done kind of professional learning opportunity. So the approach that is being taken by the committee is modules that hit each requirement. So hopefully that adds some clarity as to where we're going and kind of the timeline that Patty had put on the screen.
Thank you, Board Member Earl, and then we'll go to Board Member Straight.
If I'm correct, and maybe you'll have to correct me if I'm not correct, but what Patty put up earlier, we will be discussing tomorrow. I don't think we've actually voted on that, although there's tenets of it that are from the rule. The number 1 talks about standards, and I'm not sure we approved any standards that we want to pull out of resolutions that in 5 years disappear. Or, actually it's 4 years from now. So there is more dialogue. Am I right in saying that about that? So I think, it's good to voice concerns. All those professional learning elements have to go through the process of those 4 items that the legislature, or 3 items the legislature, 4 that we put into place. So they should have a vetting mechanism. Although I would say, while it is optional for districts, I'm well aware that these LEAs are waiting for us to even move. Like, they're nervous in this area. So to say that our professional development that we're recommending does not have any impact would be false. They're waiting for us to decide what to do or not do. And so it needs to be, we need to be careful how we weigh into this. So anyways, optional maybe, I don't know if they view it that way, so.
Thank you. Deputy Norman?
Yes, I wanted, so there's two different areas with educational equity. And I wanted to draw back to the motion for today, which is set one on the definition. It's not the modules. So the set one definition was actually discussed during the creation of the narrative for R277-328. At that time, there were certain words that were talked about. For example, we heard public comment this morning about abusive conduct. What does that mean? There were other words that had different meanings or multiple meanings depending on the audience. And so this was meant to have a common definition. So when a word was stated, that everyone knew what the Utah State Board of Education was speaking to, and there would have that clarity of saying that when the Utah State Board of Education uses this term, then this is what it means. So on that today, there are 9 definitions, and those 9 definitions are mostly found in R277-328. And then there are also the definitions that will be a part of some of the questions that are coming up. So I just wanted to frame that this is specifically about those definitions, not the modules themselves. And we've actually been working on the definitions since August of 2020.
Thank you. Board Member Straight?
Yes, I just want to speak in favor of the motion by Chair Hansen, in that it returns us to our strategic plan, puts us in alignment with what we've done from the very beginning. I remember that from my first day on the board. In fact, it was just clarified that 6 months before I came on the board, this was put in place by the rule. And so really what Resolution 9001 did was it imposed upon what we were already working upon. We incorporated that within. And, I am not in agreement that this is CRT. I know that's been expressed. That's an opinion, just like my opinion is that it is not. And we are working for the betterment of all children. I appreciate this change with the amendment by Chair Hansen, because it brings us full circle back into alignment with what the strategic plan and the mission and vision of USBE is. Thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Belknap, Vice Chair Belknap. Oh, you took your hand down. Board Member Earl, your hand is up still. Did you have a follow-up? You're muted. You're muted.
I'm thinking at this point not. I have more to say maybe in committee tomorrow, so.
Okay, Vice Chair Belknap's hand is back up.
Well, I was just going to call the question, but Board Member Moss, I was coming in behind him.
Okay, Board Member Moss.
A quick procedural clarification. We've got 10 definitions here. They run through C. Is the idea, and I apologize if I've missed it as I've tried to be digging into the weeds of this particular set. Is the idea here that there are more to come? And if so, when? What's the anticipated next steps if we vote yes on this set?
Chair Hansen.
Respond, Chair.
Yes, and just to clarify, this amendment is just to change the wording on a label, not on any content inside, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
I can respond to 2 things. First, I think that we as staff and committee have not been diligent enough in keeping our terminology consistent with educational equity, and that is the heading that should be on all these documents. That's what we're talking about. And so my motion is to start a process on this document to have that in, and we can instruct staff, and we will in committee, to use that educational equity heading and keep our terminology consistent. With regard to the definitions, we have these words that are being used in training that need to be used consistently. And so this is the first set of words, and we anticipate that there will be another set. And as we complete the training, there may be more words that are added. And so the board will be asked to consider possibly several other sets. But in lieu of waiting until we had 50 words for the board to consider and consume all that time, we took this in chunks. And so this is the first 9 that the committee came to a consensus on to pass on to the board. And I would anticipate that it's on our agenda again this month. So we'll be discussing another set of words.
And to your other question, I think a couple of people have asked this is, well, what's the scope of this? Where's it going to end? How long is it going to go? My understanding is that that's up to the Standards and Assessment Committee, and they'll put forward, they'll just decide narrow or wide or whatever they decide they'll put forward to the board. That's my understanding.
I think
yeah,
if I can respond, Chair Davis,
please.
Deputy Superintendent Norman laid out the basic parameters that that's the direction that we're proposing and heading, and that will be discussed in our meeting tomorrow. But we need to cover all the tenants in 328 to comply with our own rule. So whether that's 1 module or 5 modules or 3 modules, it really depends on the length of the module. And our constituents, I guess, in the school community have asked for smaller chunks. So there will be several smaller modules is the direction that we're headed now, rather than one big training that would consume a day or 2 days.
Thank you. Board Member Straight?
Well, I just want to say that I sensed in that question, maybe I misunderstood it, that it's standards and assessment. We're calling the shots, we're making the decisions. We're doing it based on what we see as our mandate from the board. If the board wishes to make that different, then I hope that the board will speak.
Yes, and my comment was to scope, to narrow or broad scope. So thank you. I lost my participant list.
We've got an amendment on the table.
Okay, can you put that amendment in writing back up? Director Van Holten, for some reason, it has disappeared from my.
Find it too. Excuse me.
Seeing no other hands. We have an amendment on the board that we move that the board approve the definitions. This is not, we already passed the amendment. Sorry. Did we pass the amendment? This is the motion that we're looking at. Can we put the amendment up on the screen?
This is the amendment.
It's not. That would be an amended. That would be an amended motion if this amendment passes. But we have an amendment that needs to be passed to get to this point.
It's changing the title.
We just typed it on the screen a few minutes ago.
This is what they typed. I don't think they typed the whole thing, Chair Hansen.
Oh, they.
Okay.
So I'm going to just wing it for a minute, I guess. We have an amendment on the floor that the board amend the title to educational equity definitions. Does that work, Chair Hansen?
That's fine.
So we have an amendment on the floor to change the title to educational equity definitions. We had discussion on the amendment, so please vote. This passes unanimously. And now we have a motion on the floor and that would be what we just had up. I think, or do I read it as the original motion as amended with the EDI language in it? Okay, so I'm getting a nod from Vice Chair Belknap. So the board approves, we move that the board approves the definitions in EDI definition set 1 as equity, diversity, and inclusion board approved definitions as amended for final approval. Any additional discussion to that motion? Seeing none, please vote. Oh, Board Member Hutchings, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I did not see your hand. We're in the middle of this vote. That passes with Board Members Klein opposed.
That's how I see it.
Thank you, Chair Hansen. I think we're at the end.